suppose the only reason I'm qualified to talk about this is because I've lived these experiences myself, and I'm not afraid to accept my part in them, really as a way of healing, you know. And I think that it's absolutely correct that the wider truth is understood by the public. So one thing that was really important to me was sort of, where possible, reaching out to people affected by it and helping them get justice themselves. And if any of them ever wanted to have a conversation with me, I was perfectly open to having a chat and allowing them to get some closure for themselves, because what I realised later on is that the human impact of the activities of the paper was huge. We had people who were suspecting the nearest and dearest of selling information on them. They didn't know who to trust, who not to trust. Lifelong friendships between people collapsed and died and have never been able to recover, and all because you've got some journalists who just want to get fodder for their Sunday newspapers. It's really important to look at who the beneficiaries of this criminality were, and it was the people at the very top of the editorial tree. So it's the editor, the deputy editor, and people directly beneath them. But it was also the shareholders of Mirror Group newspapers, because their papers have never been so successful in the modern era as when they were hacking telephones. Okay, and they all benefited financially from that arrangement. So you can understand why it was in nobody's interests to come clean and be honest about it, which is why we're in a situation now whereby the truth is really only just beginning to come out. So in 2014, I ended up becoming a witness for the Crown in a big criminal trial at the Old Bailey. And off the back of that, I also explained everything that had happened at Mirror Group newspapers earlier on in my career. I gave as much information as I could in order to, assist justice. So I spoke about the methodology of phone hacking, how I came to be involved, other senior people whom I was aware of, who were at it themselves. It ended up starting what's become quite a large group litigation of people suing Mirror Group newspapers for intercepting their voicemails, not only during the period when I worked for them, but also for several years beforehand and for several years afterwards, because as I later learned, actually phone hacking was completely rife across the business. So I volunteered to give evidence at the civil trial, which ended up giving its name to the Gulati Judgment. That wasn't the most fun I've ever had in my life. I spent a day giving my evidence in chief and then being cross-examined on that by Mirror Group newspapers as QC. And they try to get under your skin a little bit. They try to sort of contradict you. They try to ruffle your feathers, as it were. And it's a highly, highly, highly unpleasant experience. So because of the testimony I gave at the civil trial, the judge was able to set what they call in legal terms quantum for the damages for the people who've been affected. So Mirror Group wanted to argue that it was like a personal injury case and people should have no more than maybe £20,000 or £30,000 in damages. But the judge was able to see, because suddenly he'd been able to have all of the evidence kind of laid out for him and his hand held through how it all worked, he was able to see the true impact of it. And so instead of it being 20 or 30 or 40,000 pounds in damages, people were being awarded hundreds of thousands of pounds in damages. And of course, when you start awarding individuals hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds in damages, and you have witness evidence that there are likely to be hundreds, if not thousands, of victims, then you can see that the figures involved for a company like Mirror Group newspapers are very, very significant indeed. So far, Mirror Group set aside about £80 million to deal with historical phone hacking issues within its business. I think there's every likelihood that that could raise rather significantly by the time they've dealt with this piece of business altogether. I won't be able to say for certain whether or not it represents an existential problem for Mirror Group newspapers, but it's riding pretty close to the wind. On the one hand, I'm happy that I've been able to facilitate for victims of these sorts of crimes some kind of closure, apologies, a little voyage of discovery in terms of the information that was held about them and how stories about them came about, and of course that they got damages. I don't know whether or not it absolves me of anything on a personal level. I don't know if it even makes me feel particularly better about what I did, but then this isn't really about me. This is about them, and it's about the organisation. I can't change the past. All I can do is define my own future, and the only way I can do that is really by being honest and by trying to atone not only for what I did, but also the wider crimes of Fleet Street at that time.